Ladies and gentlemen, the new Osteo Striga submachine gun has been garnering a lot of attention over the past month. It does feel like an extremely powerful weapon, and in many respects, it is, currently sitting at number 7 in the PvE usage charts. But just like any weapon in Destiny 2, there are aspects of this gun that can hold it back. So we're going to size up Osteo Striga in this video, run the damage numbers, test its utility, and discuss its performance for both PvP and PvE. And if you've yet to obtain this weapon, there is very little effort required in obtaining it. Finish the Witch Queen's main campaign, head to the weapon crafting table in the Enclave, and treat yourself to one. But, you must have purchased the Witch Queen Deluxe Edition for this weapon to be available to you. A savvy business play on Bungie's part? Sure, but maybe not the most consumer-friendly tactic. But it is what it is. Anyway, if you do end up enjoying this video, like, subscribe, share it with your friends. Any support you're willing to lend the channel is always greatly appreciated. But with that, let's move on to Osteo Striga's stats and perks. Osteo Striga is an exotic kinetic submachine gun firing at 600 rounds per minute with a base 27 rounds in the magazine. For the stats, this is a fully customizable exotic, so they will be altered depending on your barrel, magazine, and stock selections. Just at base though, we're looking at solid marks in range, moderate stability and aim assist, with lower marks in handling and reload speed. Plus a very vertical recoil direction with the stat sitting at 99. Me personally, I went pretty hard at stability and reload, speccing mine out with polygonal rifling, hand-laid stock, and flared magwell. I'm very happy with mine, but throw on the perks that you think will work best for you. Osteo Striga's intrinsic trait is Screaming Swarm. Fires a stream of sentient toxic projectiles that track the targeted enemy. The exotic perk is Toxic Overload. Landing a final blow or multiple precision hits triggers a blast that poisons nearby targets. And for any warlocks in the room, your ears should have perked up just a little bit. More on that coming up though. And then there is a catalyst for this weapon. On top of adding 20 to stability and 30 to the reload stat, poison final blows will return ammo to the magazine, actually overflowing the mag in the process. We'll be looking into that aspect a little bit deeper in the next section. The catalyst is unique though, in the sense that it can be directly purchased and applied when shaping or reshaping the weapon. But it is expensive in terms of crafting materials, costing 3 Ascendant Alloy, 140 Ruinous Element, and 2000 Neutral Element. This is subject to change though, since Bungie did announce that they will be removing the legendary crafting materials at some point in the future. One more caveat for the catalyst, you do need to level up your Osteo Striga to rank 10. All in all, a hefty price tag and a big ask, but a worthwhile investment, at least in my opinion. Moving on to the weapon testing section though, so we can take a look at Osteo Striga's damage numbers and functionality. Alright, first thing to note right off the bat, this is a projectile-based weapon. Shots fired do have travel time. Unlike every other projectile-based weapon in the game though, those toxic bullets do suffer from damage fall off, which I'll pace out in just a few. For the tracking on these rounds, they will bend to catch a target, but your reticle needs to be at least somewhere in the ballpark. I like to think of it more as ridiculously strong aim assist. Upon securing a kill, you can see that poison blast emitted from the downed enemy. Any secondary targets caught in the AoE will begin to take a fairly potent amount of poison damage, and the damage from the poison will increase with each tick. More on that when we get into the damage testing. If you have the catalyst applied, any enemy that dies out to this poison will add 27 rounds to the magazine, overfilling it in the process. Now, for whatever reason, this does seem to be a little bit inconsistent when the bullet count in your magazine starts to get up into the higher ranges, but I've personally seen 107 rounds in there, and heard that it can actually be built up to 110. For the reload speeds, at base, which I have no real way of testing, is listed on light.gg at 2.35 seconds. My variant with flared magwell and the catalyst applied clocks in at 1.63 seconds. And if you want to throw a single SMG loader mod on top of that, you're looking at 1.37 seconds. Let's hop into some damage numbers, but do keep in mind that PvE damage numbers are variable and will change depending on content scaling or enemy tier. So, I do all of my testing in the Conflux Lost sector on Nessus versus Karl the Colossus to try to keep these values consistent and comparable from video to video. Sadly, overworld damage scaling has shifted with the launch of Witch Queen, which was expected, but we're more or less starting fresh with Osteo Striga here. Regardless, a crit versus Karl is hitting for 1,925 points of damage and registering 1,373 to the body. When just considering the bullet damage and working within the base 27 round magazine, Osteo Striga's max single mag damage comes in at 51,975. Time to fire off all 27 rounds is 2.61 seconds, so single mag damage per second sits at 19,914. If we compare this to a legendary kinetic precision frame SMG like Friction Fire, sharing that same 600 round per minute fire rate, It's scoring 1,737 on a crit and 1,239 to the body. So, a bit more damage out of Osteo Striga intrinsically. But that's not really the full story. Remember, the poison damage over time can be procced by landing multiple precision hits. 7 to be exact. Versus a single target, the poison damage will tick a total of 19 times. And this is a slow process, taking roughly 9.5 seconds. The first poison tick scores 2,504 points of damage, and ramps all the way up to 11,564 points of damage on the final tick. And if you're familiar with Thorn, you'll know that Thorn's poison damage ticks will overlap with each shot landed. Not the case with Osteo Striga. Once the poison is applied, reprocking it will reset the effect. But if Carl does eat every last bit of the poison cycle, this is an additional 107,059 points of damage. If you want to see what this weapon's capable of when firing on all cylinders, with a 107 round magazine, if we land all crits, that's 205,975 points of damage from the bullets, and another 53,500 points of damage from the poison since it is periodically resetting. But that's nearly 260,000 points of total damage delivered in 10.68 seconds. In terms of damage per second, that's 24,295, with any of the remaining poison damage continuing to tick away after the fact. Simply stated, that's a lot of damage. One last thing I wanted to showcase here before we move on. I generally do like to keep my weapon reviews class neutral, but necrotic grip for the warlocks. Just like Thorn, Osteo Striga's poison damage does synergize with this exotic. So anytime an enemy target dies out to the poison damage, they're going to release another poison AoE blast. It's basically a domino effect, and one that will rip through packs of enemies like wildfire. If you're a warlock and you haven't tried out this exotic combo yet, please go do it. It is extremely impressive. Moving on to the PvP section, but there are a few points that are more easily measured in the Crucible that are germane to the PvE side as well. The physical range. Osteo Striga will hit for full damage from 23 meters away. At 24 meters, damage fall off will begin to occur. And this is with the range stats sitting at 78. This could vary slightly depending on your perk selections. And the poison AoE blast. It has a maximum radius of 7.5 meters. That is a very healthy 15 meter total diameter. For a point of reference, this is nearly double the working radius of a base vortex grenade. Now onto the damage. Osteo Striga deals 25 points of damage on a crit and 18 points of damage to the body. On paper, this puts the optimal time to kill at 0.7 seconds with 7 crits and 1 body shot, 8 crits versus higher tier resilience levels. But if you do lead off with 7 rapid crits, that poison is going to proc, essentially finishing off the job for you. The body shot time to kill comes in at 1 second with 11 shots landed. But remember, this weapon is firing travel time projectiles. They are not hit scan, they do not instantly hit the target. So true time to kills will be longer and will be exaggerated at further distances. But the poison damage in PvP will tick up to 7 times at 5 points of damage per tick, and this 35 points of damage is delivered in just over 3 seconds. Versus a roaming super, Osteo Striga drops Agent Sparkle's inner arc staff at 12 meters in 1.92 seconds. And that is true in-game time with the clock starting on the initial trigger pull. But that should wrap up this rather lengthy testing section. Let's move on and talk about how Osteo Striga performs in-game. In terms of Osteo Striga's performance, in PvE, it really is an ad clearing monster. SMGs do inherently thrive in this aspect, but this one takes it to a whole nother level. As we saw in the damage testing, the damage output is just a shade higher than other 600 round permitted SMGs. But that poison damage will drop your standard trash ad with just a single tick, and it will snuff out some of your more tanky targets given enough time. And the rather friendly radius of the AoE lets you catch a good bit of ads even if they're not as tightly grouped up as you'd want them to be. And with Osteo Striga being a primary exotic, it does inherently do 40% more damage to red health bar enemies. This might not be extremely apparent in lower level or baseline level activities, but when stepping up into higher end content, that's when you're going to feel the difference. There, even your standard red bar targets can be much more threatening. Osteo Striga really helps out in disposing of them quickly, and once you get that catalyst unlocked, you can start building up those absurdly large magazine sizes. But Osteo Striga also holds its own in the single target damage department. And a lot of that comes back to the Toxic Overload perk not exclusively being tied to kill activation. If you have a ballooned up magazine size, you can just dump those rounds in a boss's face. And let those poison ticks pick up a little extra damage where they can. Or proc the poison with Osteo Striga and switch to a different weapon. You can dump damage with your energy or heavy while those poison ticks continue to ramp up. Then the tracking rounds can be a really nice feature. Yeah, they do have travel time and they do suffer from damage fall off, but if you gotta spray down some enemies while on the move, the tracking nature of the rounds goes a long way in ensuring that those bullets are going to connect, even if you're a little bit off target. Some cons. Osteo Striga is a bit limited in its physical range, but it's an SMG and that's kinda to be expected. But still, in very high level content, close range weaponry might not always be the best play. Then the base reload speed is terribly slow and does need some attention. I ran it without fluid magwell initially and just couldn't stomach it. Too slow for me. The catalyst definitely helps matters in this respect, but it isn't cheap to unlock. So you may need to save up your crafting materials and then spend them immediately if you're not independently wealthy in that department. Then in your larger 6-player matchmade activities, Osteo Striga sometimes doesn't have a chance to shine. If you got 5 other guardians going hard in the paint, they might mop up all your kills before that poison damage has a chance to take effect. So you might be working off that base 27 round magazine more often than not. Moving over to PvP, where my feelings are more mixed on this gun. It's a projectile based weapon in a hit scan world. This doesn't bother me at all on the PvE side of things, but in PvP, gunfights are won and lost in fractions of a second. So you have to subconsciously account for the time it's going to take for those rounds to reach their target when thinking about if you're ahead or behind in a gunfight. And you also might need to lead your shots a little bit. The tracking on these rounds really does help out in PvP as well. But if an enemy's screaming horizontally across your screen, you might want to get in front of them a little bit when pulling the trigger. Both of the previous 2 points have Osteo Striga asking you to develop a feel for the gun before getting the most out of it, especially with it performing differently than almost every other weapon in the game. Last con here, the exotic nature of Osteo Striga seems to lend itself more to the PvE side of the game. In PvP, the poison damage ticks aren't quite as impressive, and it does need to be that way for the sake of balance. But with it only putting really minimal damage on secondary targets, having that overfilled magazine provided by the catalyst is gonna happen far less often. On a brighter note, Osteo Striga is a pretty darn forgiving weapon in some respects. The tracking on the rounds can be an extremely welcome feature, especially for players who don't exactly have pinpoint accurate aim. And shots placed near an enemy guardian's head seem to want to pull toward the head, resulting in more consistent crit damage. And just like in PvE, it's a great weapon for firing from the hip, from the air, or on the run. And the time to kills for Osteo Striga, while they do carry an asterisk, are quick. At closer ranges, this gun can drop enemy targets extremely fast. And lastly, Osteo Striga does hold its own pretty darn well versus roaming supers. You do need some space to operate, but the tracking helps you deliver that steady stream of damage, versus targets that are often quite mobile and pretty elusive. And if you do happen to land 7 crits, that little bit of poison damage is going to chip away at the enemy target as well. When looking at Osteo Striga from a holistic level though, this is a really, really good gun. In PvE, I do think this is a top tier exotic primary. It's one of the best in my opinion, and while I don't feel it's quite as strong in PvP, in the hands of the right player, it can definitely pull its weight in a lot of game modes. But hey, if you did enjoy the video, please remember to leave it a like, and consider subscribing to the Ironworker Gaming channel to catch more of my upcoming Destiny 2 content in the near future. If you're looking for a group of Guardians to play or talk Destiny with, the link to the Ironworker Gaming Discord server is in this video's description, and leave any thoughts about Osteo Striga down in the comments. I'm always interested to hear your take on things. And with all that being said, you guys are awesome, and I will catch you on the next one.